وسلم على عباده الذين اصطفى بعد. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى ال سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. So a couple of points that I didn't mention this morning about bukhul. Remember one of the things I remember a very nice story about surrounding the idea that bukhul can be about things other than just money. And one of those was one of my teachers, Sheikh Hussaini. He mentioned to me one time, he said, I don't know, I think I was doing an Itekaf program or something like that. He said, if you have any coins, just use them for the crowd. And what he meant by this, and sometimes people might not really relate with that, but if you're giving a lot of talks, when you're actually on the speaker circuit, there's a lot of spiritual diseases that actually come when you're in the public eye and you're going out. And this is a well-known pitfall, so much so that, you look at Mufti Taqi Usmani, that he wasn't allowed to actually give public talks for a long time as a part of his tarbiyah. Right? He was one of the greatest scholars in the world. But his sheikh would tell him, no, you're not giving any talks. And so he would sit quiet and until he wanted to make sure that this person was purified before you get out there. Because when you get out there in the spotlight, there's a lot of different things that come up. And so one of those things that happens is that, when you're trying to make if you have one of the diseases that comes up is you want to make a point that no one else has made before. Right? If you're going to say something that everyone else has already said, that doesn't seem new, it doesn't get the same, glaze of wonder in everyone's eyes. And that's a problem, because one of the things our teacher said is your job is not to make up anything new. Your job is just to take what you heard from your teachers and you're just giving the message to the next generation. You're just a messenger. So in some ways that doesn't let you get to your head too, because then you just tell yourself, I'm just a parrot. I heard it all from there, I'm just telling anything, there's no phobia in me. And that's really just the chain that's been coming down all the way from the Prophet ﷺ, the whole idea of a sanad. Right? If there wasn't a sanad, then anyone would say whatever they want. But we don't have, as scholars of the deen, as servants of the deen, the allowance or the latitude to say whatever you want. You only are able to speak within circumscribed terms, and those circumscribed terms are based on inheritance, what we got from our elders, we got from their elders, we got from their elders, going back to the Sahaba, going back to the Prophet ﷺ. So that's one of the things that really keeps the deen so preserved in Islam, as opposed to many of these other religions. They don't have the same fail-safes, so to speak. And so one of the other things is to, when you get a certain point, and especially if it's a very strong point, then you say, I'll save this. Right? I'll save this for a big bayan. I'll save this for, when maybe my Eid khutbah, and this and that. But he said, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, first of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put that thought in your heart. You put that in your mind. He said, if it's there, He said, spend it. Spend it, He said, Allah will replenish it. And so even with your thoughts, your ideas, the idea to be able to give to others generously and not to covet it, that's a type of spending. One of the other things I wanted to mention is about, so that was one anecdote. The other anecdote was, or the other point was about one of the treatments. One of the treatments for being tight-handed is doing the opposite. So, and this is something to understand when it comes to spiritual diseases. Sometimes when the paper is bent too much this way, you know that it's not enough just to make it straight, because then the bend still remains in the paper. You got to go the other way, right? And this is something sometimes the mashayikh use, which is another sort of side point, but important point to know is that it's good that we're going through these, this manual, but even if you're in psychiatry, you know that when you go through the DS manual, you go through the psychiatric rotation, you look at every disease and you think that you have it, right? Or, you're like, oh yeah, I have that, I have borderline, I have this, and then you think, and then you're seeing everyone else, and it's like, yeah, he has that disease and he has that disease, and that's not really the point. There's a problem with self-diagnosis, number one, and number two, with self-medication too. So these are things to create awareness, right? And some general guidelines. But we should always, keep the sohbah of people who have wisdom to help in our own rectification, because it also requires a tabib. You just don't have the medication, you also want a doctor who can tell you what the right medication for the right person is. Because not the two different people will respond two very different ways to the same type of medication. So something would be good for another person, one person, but it won't be good for another person. So for example, like I'm telling you right now, it might be, sometimes you have to bend it the other way. So that doesn't mean you just go home and say, okay, I'm giving everything away. Right? Because for some people that will get them in more trouble, it'll get them in more trouble in their deen. But just understanding that idea is sometimes you will see the mashayikh, the teachers, telling people to give up things which are sometimes normally permissible. So they're saying, are you making this is permissible, look at these people, they're bid'atis, they're making something halal, haram, and so on and so forth. No, it's just trying to return balance to something that was off kilter. So someone, for example, the nafs is not in control, they might tell the student, don't eat sweets. Are sweets halal? Yes. But for a short period of time, to tell them to avoid sweets so that they become more in control of their nafs, so they don't start eating things that they shouldn't be eating, and become indiscriminate about their diet, is completely okay because it's for a higher purpose. But one of the cures for bukhul is just to spend. And there comes in one narration from Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu that قال الله أنفق يا ابن آدم, O son of Adam, spend, right? أنفقوا عليك, I'll spend on you. And this won't happen, right? The beginning of this equation starts with the individual. You have to take the first step, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show His colors. And what happens is when people are sometimes that's the problem with miserliness, you're too scared to take that first step, you're too cowardly to take the first step, so you never get to see the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responding and fulfilling your needs and your halal and stuff, and then a person becomes weaker and weaker and weaker, and becomes this vicious negative cycle. On the other side, if you take that leap of faith and spend in the path of Allah, spend on your family, and are generous, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replenishes you, it becomes a positive cycle. Right? Then you said, it will be okay. Allah will take care of it. And then it increases a person with tawakkul. That's also should sort of temper this idea with, it's good to spend, but it's actually blameworthy to spend too much. And that's something also to mention on the side of how the nafs works and the disease of the heart. The nafs is always going to extremes. It's very hard to stay right in the middle, right? And right in the middle is, I was just joking with the kids, the other day on our group chat, how like parents talk to the kids like, great day, you go to Itekaf, don't become too extreme, you don't want to become too deendar, you should. And so people are just, want a little bit of dunya, you want to have your cake and eat it too. That's not what I'm talking about. But there is something about talking about being on the middle path, the Sirat al-Mustaqim. So what I mean is that when people go to extremes outside the bounds of the Sharia. Some people who will fast so much that it will hurt their body. Right? That's not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires from us. Some people who will stand so much in prayer that they don't fulfill their responsibilities towards their family. Right? You're neglecting other things in the deen, and that's a type of extremism. And there's fewer people who go that way, but that's also a problem as well. You look at the Khawarij, which is sort of the quintessential example of people who were extremists in the deen. And even some of these ISIS people, they're ostensibly, you might look at them, and that's where a lot of people got confused. They looked at these people and they're like, they look really religious, right? They have long beards and they're wearing amama, and it's all about la ilaha illallah, and we want to establish, Islam, and so that we want to stop oppression. And that's how they get these young kids, because they showed them these videos of these people being oppressed, and like, we don't care about your Muslim brothers, and you don't care about your Muslim sisters, and they touch at the heartstrings. And young people who want to establish equity in the world, and want to establish balance in the world, and they want to be socially active and agents of positive change in the world, they get sucked in, right? Because they sort of trust them and take them on surface. The Khawarij were also like that, right? And the Khawarij were, there was a deviant sect in Islamic history. And just to give you an idea, if you were to see them, their eyes would be sunken, because they used to fast so much and they used to stand so much in prayer. And one of them, they were going to cut their tongues, and he started screaming. They were torturing him, he didn't do anything. And they were about to cut his tongue, and then he started screaming. They said, why are you screaming? He said, I don't want to die except with the dhikr of Allah on my tongue. So when you meet people like that, people get confused. It's like they're deen, there's not deen. And just to be very clear, I asked one of my teachers about ISIS, and he said it beautifully in one sentence. He says, there is no deen in them. There is no deen. That's not Islam. That's not what the Prophet ﷺ brought, right? In any case, you want to be moderate. And the Quran also talks about this. This says, don't be so stingy that your hands are stuck to your neck. And don't just spread it. Spread your hands openly. And then you sit tomorrow and then you're blameworthy. Now you have to go ask someone else for money because you did so much at the fundraiser yesterday. And now you have to, your family is in a difficult situation because you gave too much to help your brother out, so on and so forth. It was a good thing and your intention was good, but you should also have some type of thing. And this is an advice that the Prophet ﷺ gave to the Sahaba themselves. When the Sahaba, they had this impetus, and you saw this in the Sahaba. Some of them would say that, oh, that's the Prophet, but I'm going to stand all night and pray. I'm going to fast all the time. And the Prophet ﷺ got extremely angry, right? He got extremely angry, and he came to correct him. And he said that, this is, he established what is the sunnah. فَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. Whoever turns away from my sunnah is not from amongst me. You have to see in this middle way. And one of the Sahaba, for example, he wanted to give everything away when he was passing away. And the Prophet, and it was conversation going back and forth, and then the Prophet said, "Thuluth wa thuluthu kathir." He said, a third, you can request up to a third. And that's a lot. Because it's better that you leave something behind for your family, so that they don't have to spread their hands in front of someone else. Then you're just going and giving in sadaqah, right? And then you left your family in a tough spot. That's not deen. And one of my sheikhs, he used to say a very strong statement. He said that, something like, that person who doesn't have a house, like a paid off house, he's like, that person doesn't have any iman or something. Like some very strong statement. And you have to understand how, like, whatever, 100 years ago, what the context was, that in the Indian subcontinent, women were generally completely dependent on, they weren't working, they weren't necessarily educated, they spent their entire life dependent on their husbands. And if their husbands were to pass away and didn't have other kin to rely on, now they were left on the streets. And they would have to maybe be pushed into other lines of work which were not appropriate. They were put in a difficult spot. So he said the least that you should do is have enough foresight to have a shelter over your wife's head if something were to happen to you tomorrow. That is a moral responsibility. So, I mean, yes, it's good to spend, but you have to be careful. Right, the next disease that we're going to talk about, it's a subtle disease at a certain level, and it's called, the word for it is batar. And this refers to being exultant, having excessive mirth. And I'm going to use a lot of different words because there's not a really good translation for it. And even the Arabic language, there's a word batar, it doesn't only have one meaning. It has many different meanings. Having a dislike for something that's not worthy for having dislike for, so on and so forth. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ was asked about kibr, and he said, batar al-haqqi wa ghamtu an-nas, that to reject it. Over there, batar is being used to reject something. So it has different connotations, but I'm using it in this one particular connotation. It comes in one verse. وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ خَرَجُوا مِنْ دِيَارِهِمْ بَطَرًا. Right? They came out of their house, بَطَرًا وَرِيَاءً نَاسٍ. That they came out and they are, if you just read the translation, it says that they're just arrogant, right? But it doesn't really capture the idea. They're coming out where they're, chest full of pride, and they're happy, and they're full of themselves. It's like a hot air balloon, and they're walking, and they're happy, and they're just like, feel like they're invincible, and nothing can stop in our ways, and they're showing off. That idea, that whole conglomeration, right? You can take, you would call batar, right? وَكَمْ أَهْلَكْنَا مِنْ قَرْيَةٍ, another verse, وَكَمْ أَهْلَكْنَا مِنْ قَرْيَةٍ بَطَرَتْ مَعِيشَتُهَا. Batarat over there, it's a little bit different connotation, but it's all this, this amalgam, this constellation of symptoms that go together because they're connected linguistically and then they're also connected psychologically. Is that this has over here that they're exalted, right? They're very proud and full of their lifestyle, right? What was going on in their life, how they were living the good life, they were living the high life. Ma'ishatuha, right? They were spoiled. Right? There also has an element of being spoiled. And this disease of batar is something that you see much more in developed nations, right? First world nations, nations which are technologically advanced. And that is why people, particularly in America, are particularly susceptible to this idea of falling into batar, because people's accomplishments delude them. Right? They think that people become happy with themselves. They become full of themselves. And they think that they're the best in the world. Now the Americans, so many Americans, they think, yeah man, we're the best in the world. Right? They're fully convinced. Well, you're actually not. Right? I mean, you don't have this, there's economies which are coming up which have, if you look at the rate of growth, they exceed the rate of growth of our GDP. You talk about, in terms of so many different things, in terms of education, we lag behind the rest of the world. There's a lot of problems. There's, you look at our crime and penal system, you look at, how our families are broken. We're lagging in so many other indicators. Even on the global index of happiness, America is not, whatever they take as the, indicators of happiness, we are not the happiest country in the world. So psychologically, our people aren't doing as well as plain people. So we're not, right, in so many ways, the best country, but it's in people's head, right? And they think that they're the best, that we have the best. There was this one time where we took the youth on a trip for the youth group in St. Louis, and I still remember this, that we were on the river. Right? We went on some river and we were going through this lazy river, and it was all the youth counselors and the youth. And obviously the river is shared with other people, so there was this this big round tube, but not many people can sort of sit in there type of thing. And astaghfirullah, there was not good things happening in that tube. Let's just put it that way, right? And there's women who are not dressed appropriately and this and that. And so we're like, okay, keep your gaze down, just get down the river. So you're passing them, and I still remember that voice of this one girl, shouting from there. She's like, "Hey, you guys, you want to be here? You want to be here." That is batra. That idea is we're having a good time, we're so awesome, we're white, we're beautiful, and you want to be here and doing exactly what we're doing. And the sad thing is, there was probably some people who did, at some level, want to be there, right? And that's the idea. The archetype of the person who's batir is the Qarun, right? The Qarun. And there's a big problem with being, Qarun-like. Where is it that وَإِذْ قَالَ قَوْمُهُ وَآتَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْكُنُوزِ مَا إِنَّ مَفَاتِحُ لَتَنُوءُ بِالْعُصْبَةِ أُولِي الْقُوَّةِ إِنَّ قَارُونَ كَانَ مِنْ قَوْمِ مُوسَى فَبَغَى, right? وَآتَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْكُنُوزِ. So the Qarun, he had so much wealth, and he was the person who had batar, and people around him, they would tell him, إِذْ قَالَ قَوْمُ لَا تَفْرَحْ إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الْفَرِحِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't like those people who are exalted, because that was his attitude. He was like, man, I'm all that, right? I got it all. So it's bad to be in that position, to be that archetype, but what's almost even worse is to be the people who have their eyes and desire to be like that, right? You're a wannabe Qarun. You're not even Qarun. At least if you're Qarun, you're enjoying yourself. You're a wannabe Qarun. You're a loser. And you want to be like Qarun, that's even worse. And there's so many people that when they said that people saw Qarun, the Quran talks about that. They said, لَوْلَا أُوتِيَ مِثْلَ مَا أُوتِيَ قَارُونَ, that we wish we were given the same thing as Qarun. So people see stuff on billboards, and people see stuff on Netflix, and people see stuff on the movies, and people see stuff on social media, on Instagram, right? And these beautiful images, and they're in their hearts, even if they're not saying with their tongues, they say, لَوْلَا أُوتِيَ مِثْلَ مَا أُوتِيَ قَارُونَ. Man, I wish I had that. Despite all the niqabs and all the long beards and all the topis, in their heart, لَوْلَا أُوتِيَ مِثْلَ مَا أُوتِيَ قَارُونَ. They're not, we should be رَضِيتُ بِاللَّهِ رَبًّا وَبِالْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا وَبِمُحَمَّدٍ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم رَسُولًا وَنَبِيًّا. What we have is the best thing ever. You don't need any other way. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. In the person of the Prophet ﷺ, there is an ultimate role model from you. We don't need to look to the east. We don't need to look to the west. We don't need to look up, down. We don't need to look down. What we got is the best. Right? And if we want the low things of the dunya, then right? Then go, get down in any, don't be like the Bani Israel. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was sending them man and salwa from the sky, the skies, and then they're telling Musa alayhi salam, oh, we want to eat the same things, fuhumiha wa atasmiha wa basriha. We want to eat the same things, these cucumbers and the other stuff. Man and salwa from the sky. Coming to you, Bani Israel, and they say, we want cucumbers. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, go to Publix. You get your cucumbers. أَتَسْتَبْدِلُونَ الَّذِي هُوَ أَدْنَى بِالَّذِي هُوَ خَيْرٌ اهْبِطُوا مِصْرًا فَإِنَّ لَكُمْ مَا سَأَلْتُمْ. Are you going to replace something that's better with something that's low? Like, you have no sense. What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you, Muslims? Why are you chasing the Western lifestyle? Why are you chasing the GQ lifestyle? Why are you chasing the stuff of the dunya when you have the wiras of the Prophet ﷺ? That is enough for us. رَضِيتُ بِاللَّهِ رَبًّا. We have Allah and that is enough for us. Khalas. And destroy. So, in I still remember an old talk of Sheikh Hamza Yusuf when he talks. I think he was probably talking about the same thing, but people getting giddy, right? There's also this giddiness that's in, and people get giddy for different reasons. I'm not just telling you not to be in a good mood, but people sort of they just get into party mode, and that's the people of Badr. Like, you really want to understand that. Go and see, the young woman who's a 30-something in her black slip dress who pulls up to the club in a Maserati, and the way she walks out in her high heels, there's butter there, right? And there's this complete delusion because there's no self-insight that I'm doing anything wrong. It's this thing that I'm where it's at, right? This is what it's all about, and that feeling of being just so happy and so ghafil about the fact that death is going to hit you like a 10-ton train, and you're completely in ghafla about it. Right? That's a problem. And so the idea is that these people are veiled in their ghafla, they're veiled in their exuberance, and they're also veiled in their arrogance. And so that's a problem, because the way of the believer is that they're tempered. They don't lose themselves. Right? They have the al-anatu min Allah, being deliberate, being slow, being composed. This is the way of the believer, right? We don't play fast, hot, and hard. We play slow, cold, and soft. That's one way to think about it. And you look at the Prophet ﷺ, and he's the ultimate example for us. Where was the batr? Right? He said, I am a slave, and I eat like a slave. Where's the batr? He was the king of Arabia. He's sleeping on a mat that left marks on his back. Where's the batr? He lived 23 years of his life, and you can't find a single upgrade. Where's the batr? I mean, you look at their lives, and you look at how our lives should be. I mean, his life was there was no glitter, there was no glamour, there was no bling bling. That just wasn't there. And al-faqru fakhri, that our poverty should be our pride. This is something which is so distinct about the Muslims, that we're not about this capitalist culture. We're not about amassing money and more and more. We're happy, and we're content, and we're simple people. And that's a really big gift. We are people who are from the earth, and so we stay close to it. Right? We don't lose ourselves. And that is the gift of religion. That is the gift of deen, because it allows us to be true to who we really are. منها خلقناكم وفيها نعيدكم ومنها نخرجكم تارة أخرى. You're from that earth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took you off that earth and you're going back to that earth. Don't forget that. And when people forget who they are, and this is, we live in a generation, in a time where literally people are so used to being faced, they don't even know who they are anymore. They lose themselves. They lose their principles. And when you lose yourself, then you, as a human being, you just don't function the way you're supposed to. You're not functioning right. You're not working, you're not going according to the program. Right? There's a certain maintenance manual. This is how you use this appliance. When you use it in a different way, it's not going to work right. In the same way, when people lose themselves, when they get off the earth, like a hot air balloon and are flying in the skies, right? It's only a matter of time. What goes up, God's come down. Right? It has to be a crash. And there's a couple of related diseases with this butter that I thought that were worth mentioning. One of them is being spoiled. Right? Some people, they're just spoiled. They want everything nice. They're used to always life of luxury. It's okay to like nice things, right? Some people say, oh, brother, mashallah, shaykh, I just like nice things. Subhanallah, I just like pretty things. It's not only you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes nice things. My wife likes nice things. I like nice things. Your wife likes nice things. The whole humanity likes nice things. That's our fitrah. That's something special about you, right? That's not, but one thing is about being, when a person becomes spoiled, then that becomes so important to them that they become inflexible according to the situation. And when a person becomes spoiled, they become used to always wanting to have things their way. Right? It should always just be like this. They become very rigid, right? And they're too. And the reason for this is because they become too accustomed to the comforts of their life, right? To living a very comfortable life, a life of leisure, and because Allah subhanahu gives a person so much ni'mah, so much ni'mah, like I only want my life to be like this. No, this life was not meant to be Jannah. Our Jannah is coming in the hereafter. There will be ups in life, there will be downs in life. And sometimes, and so the person who wakes up and realizes that earlier and doesn't become so attached to their own comforts, lives actually a much more comfortable life. Because they're not anxious all the time. A person who's spoiled, also somewhere, is also very anxious. Right? There's people who, they're anxious about going for Hajj. Right? There's people who literally will call and they say that, oh man, I did Hajj once, never again. I didn't like the bathrooms. Right? People were sweating, it was smelly. Right? They couldn't sleep on the time. Right? I didn't have a comfortable bed to sleep on. They're like, oh, I'm gonna go to Hajj, but I don't know. I think I'm gonna exercise for a while. Build up my cardiovascular first, inshallah. Go for you're like 30 years old. You don't need to get ready. There's an old uncle, our last Hajj group that we went with, he was I don't know, 60 something, mashallah. He did 26 miles in one day, right? I mean, his wife was in a wheelchair and people pushed him. Allah puts barakah in it. This is a special place. Have some faith, right? For God's sake. But people who are spoiled, they're not willing to adjust to the circumstances. And this actually derives from another disease. And that other disease is this disease of what was probably best termed entitlement. Right? Entitlement. And this is something which literally plagues the millennial generation. I'm not even going to go into it, but maybe I will go into it a little bit because it's my pet peeve. But where you feel like the world owes you, that you deserve something. And the reason that people become entitled is because this is the connection with batar, because they fool themselves. It comes full circle. We went from batar to being spoiled to entitlement, but then it hooks back to batar, because the idea is that a person who is entitled is at some level a narcissist. They feel that the world, that they are the center of the universe and the whole world is revolving around them. Because I am so awesome for doing nothing other than just being me, everything should work my way. People should listen to me. Nothing bad should happen to me. I should never have a flat tire because I'm me. Who are you? You're nobody. But in their mind, I'm Mr. Me, right? This I with a capital I exists in their mind. So then, no, nothing bad should happen to me. And the fact of the matter is, first of all, neither is a person, no one is anything. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He levels this idea of entitlement in the Quran. In one verse just came to my mind, هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا. Wasn't there a time you weren't even something to be mentioned? You didn't have a name. Forget about your eye. You didn't have a name to your name. You didn't have a name to your existence. Right? خلقناه من نطفة أمشاج. Look at the bile fluid that you were made from. Right? Something that was spurred out that you don't even feel speaking about it in the public. That's your roots. And then, إنك لن تخرق الأرض ولن تبلغ الجبال طولا. And then you're walking high. You're not even worthy of mention. Remember where you came from. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what's it called? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't owe us anything. Right? لا تمنوا علي إيمانكم. Don't make it, people even they do this in their deen. They think that, oh, mashallah, I'm doing Allah a favor by being Islamic. Are you serious? Right? Somehow because I became Islamic, Allah, something good should happen to me in my life. MashaAllah, I prayed tahajjud today, I went to the qiyam, so I should be getting an A. And then when they saw a C because they didn't study, because they went for the qiyam, they're like, what's this? Well, what is that? That's what happens when you don't study for an exam. That's what that is. Right? لا تمنوا علي إسلامكم بل الله يمن عليكم أن هداكم. Don't tell me that you did me a favor by becoming a Muslim and coming to the deen and living a good life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did a favor on you by giving you the hidayah to do that in the first place. The favor of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't owe us anything, we owe everything to Allah. Right? We don't deserve anything. If anyone is deserving of anything, it's Allah is deserving of our ibadah. He's deserving of our love. He's deserving of our adoration. And everything that He has given us then, if we change our mind in saying that we don't deserve it, then we'll see it as a rahmah from Allah. And we'll see it as a fadl from Allah. And this is, you see so many people in their house, they have this plaque. هَذَا مِن فَضْلِ رَبِّي. If only that plaque got off the wall and into our hearts. And we really felt that everything that we have is really from the fadl of Allah. I don't deserve this. This is from the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to come to the masjid. He allows us to pray fajr. He allows us to do the work of the deen. He allows us to care about Him. He allows us to have good feelings in our heart. This is something called tawfiq. This is something called hidayah, and the source is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The entitled person, he doesn't see that. Right? Because they think that they're inherently worthy of those things and that they deserve that. And when I think about this, I think about the story that Dr. Mudassik told me about some of his residents. That he's a program director there in Brooksville, right? And so and look, maybe we're old school and I'm talking like the old thing, but like medicine is a privilege to be there, right? And you talk about the old guard about people who, and maybe I'm always talking about this, but Sheikh Hussaini will talk to you about this as well, about the people who really had the muhabba of the field and the true academics and the true doctors. Like the way he treats his teacher at the University of Chicago is the way that one of us would treat our Sheikh in Islam. He gives him so much respect, and even there's a feeling of camaraderie and a feeling of nobility, right? I mean, like one time his professor told him, like some of these trainees that he trained, and then they go on and they don't even look back, and he's like, didn't I teach these people anything? Like they also have this feeling, right? Just because they're not Muslim and just because it's not Islam doesn't take away the nobility of this. You're curing human disease, and he's like, I taught these people something. I made them, and now they're big names in their own field, and they don't look back. Right? They don't even say thank you. They don't call. I know how parents complain that you don't even call anymore. Right? The teacher will also feel like that. Sheikh Hussain gives him a tremendous amount of respect, but like when you're going through residency, the idea was that if our teachers are asatiza, right, in a way, you're attending something, they tell you to do something, you did it, right? And you didn't say this is fair, this is not fair, and like these residents are sitting or complaining to him like, oh, we don't have windows in our office or something, right? Like, are you serious? You understand how privileged, what an honor it is that you're sitting on that desk as a resident, and for every spot that you're sitting on, there's 20,000 IMGs that want to be sitting where you're sitting. But a person who's entitled, they think that I deserve to be here, I'm supposed to be here because I'm me. Right? So they're not going to see that. Another sort of related disease is mirth. Right? It's sort of translated as excessive mirth, but this is another problem. Because one other sign of a diseased heart is they're always about having a good time. Right? They're always like, they put their life in party mode, and they don't know how to turn it off. Right? It just is always about, and it can happen when you're a teenager, and it can also be when you're an uncle and auntie, right? Every weekend it's just about parties and inviting people, and it's just this endless socialization, endless vacations, endless theme parks, endless fun all the time. When you look at the majority of the expenditure in the GDP in the United States after, in terms of disposable income, most of it goes towards entertainment. Right? I mean, it's a lot of money to spend $500 on a PlayStation, or or I don't know what it's PlayStation 5 now or something, whatever it is, right? I mean, but people will spend it, and then $70 for each single game, and then they can spend hours and hours and hours. I mean, people will spend thousands of dollars to go to Disney World, and they'll do it every single year, right? And that's like their thing. They go to Disney World the way that the pious people go to Makkah. Right? That's their yearly hijrah. That's their yearly pilgrimage that we have to go to Disney World. We take the kids there. They go even when they don't have kids anymore, because that is the Kaaba of the dunya, right? They try to make the most magical place on earth. Right? The only magic there is the magic of the dunya, right? And it does a number on people, so that they keep on coming back. And the reason that people actually immerse themselves so much in entertainment, they're always having parties, always going out to eat, always hanging out. Friday night comes, come on, bro, what do you want to do? You can't just sit how about go to sleep on Friday night and get up on Saturday morning like normal people? No, you had to do something, right? Because it's Friday night. Why? What happened is Jumu'ah Mubarak on a different level. People do this because they're numbing the pain of their own existence. Right? People's lives are way too empty. They don't have meaning. They don't have purpose. People don't have substance to themselves. And because their hearts are empty, they're just completely empty of the dhikr of Allah. Right? There's nothing there. So when the nature abhors a vacuum, and when you create a vacuum, people will try to fill it with something. Right? And sometimes, whether that be drugs, or alcohol, or parties, or hanging out, or food, or something, but they're going to try to fill the void. And so they're medicating themselves at a certain level by having a good time. How much did you see this? Just think about this, just to give you sort of level setting. Look back in the time of Salaf, look at the hadith, read Hayat Sahaba. How much do you see? It's not like it never happened, right? That the Sahaba didn't spend time with each other. But how much of their time, was it a culture, right? Was it the culture of the Prophet ﷺ? How much time did you see him hanging out and having fun? Right? When did the weekend ever come? Or when did he say summer vacation, I'm going to just go on a break? He had 23 years and he changed the world. But you can't do that if you're just only about having fun. He wasn't about that. And the reason that, and this is one of the things, this doesn't mean that if you're going to become Islamic, your life is going to be boring. Right? The Prophet ﷺ, was he bored? Were the Sahaba bored? Right? Kalla hasha. That was not a thing. The funny thing is, all these people who want to do all these fun things, they're the most bored people in the world. Right? Because as soon as they come home, they're like, man, I don't know what to do. It's so boring. Right? So boring. It's always so boring. The 6-year-old comes home, Dad, I'm bored. The 13-year-old comes home, Dad, I'm bored. They're always bored. Why? Because the nafs got spoiled from this constant stimulation, and it's not possible to stimulate it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The dunya doesn't work like that. There's life. And so that becomes problematic. So yeah, when you come to the deen, Islam doesn't become more boring. It's that they became stable. They become closer to the earth. They're not flying in the sky. And they're able to live, and that's enough for them. life is enough. Right? It was enough for them to do just that. They had purpose, they had meaning, and they were able to just enjoy the simple things. You come home, share some good words with your family, you go to the masjid, you come home and eat something, then you go to sleep, you get up in the morning, you go and do your work, do good hard day's job, and you're satisfied in that, right? It gives you a level of stability. So what is the cure for this disease of batar? Is that one of the cures is to fast and to observe voluntary fast. But not just to observe voluntary fast, it's to actually observe voluntary fast in a way that you actually feel hunger. It should actually hurt a little bit. Right? I mean, we try to strategize our fast at what thing that can we eat at Sahri so that we feel the least hunger. And you don't want roza nahi lagna, right? And you don't want to feel your roza. No, you're supposed to actually feel it. It's supposed to hurt. Right? Because when it hurts, then you remember, like some people, it hurts like this all the time, and there's no iftar for it to stop hurting. It just hurts. And that's it. Like, that's the end of the story. There's no other story. So that helps. The other thing that sometimes helps is this realization that if you immerse yourself in one of the Mashaykh said it beautifully. He said, prolonged entertainment is anesthetizing the soul. If you're always just having a good time, you're just sort of killing your heart, right? Not killing your heart, you're numbing your heart, right? So it doesn't. Then you say that, oh, I go to Salah and I don't feel it because of that, right? You spend too many hours on Netflix to feel your Tarawih, right? Get off the Netflix, become a normal human being, then come to Salah, then you'll cry. It will do it for you, but you got to give it a chance. You got to unplug from the other stuff first. And the Prophet ﷺ, he asked some people, and they were laughing heartily, right? And he saw them, and then he told them, he said, mix into your gatherings the remembrance of death. And this is something that we don't do very often. We don't like to. And the Prophet ﷺ, he taught us, he said, if you knew what I knew, فَلْيَضْحَكُوا قَلِيلًا وَلْيَبْكُوا كَثِيرًا. If you knew what I knew, you would laugh a little bit, but you'd cry a lot. People, they don't want to feel those negative feelings, but those negative feelings reconnect us with the true reality that is coming, in our direction. All right. The next one is hatred, both hatred. But we're already up at, it's already around 7:10, right? So why don't we just hold this for the midnight? We'll just do this and let's see how long it is. If I just do one and everything, then we're not going to get anywhere close to covering 26. So, okay, should we do this one quickly or should we skip it? Huh? Okay, let's try to hit it quickly. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in one hadith, he said, لا تباغضوا. Don't hate. Right? Don't hate. In another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, خُذِ الْعَفْوَ وَأْمُرْ بِالْعُرْفِ وَعَرِضْ عَنِ الْجَاهِلِينَ. Be forgiving to other people. And there's a story about this particular verse that comes to mind about Umar radiallahu anhu. There was a person, just a long story, but a person sought audience for his uncle with the Prophet ﷺ. And so when with Umar radiallahu anhu, so he was Amir al-Mu'mineen at the time, he got his audience because he was very close to Umar radiallahu anhu. So he got his uncle and he came and saw Umar radiallahu anhu, and he said, he said, Ibn Khattab. He didn't call him Amir al-Mu'mineen, nothing. He said, this is not your, he basically said, it's not your father's money, right? He said, give us from this money, something very insolent like that. And we know that the Ru'ab of Umar, right? He was going to go ahead and then the nephew, right? He said that, he recited this verse. He said, khuz al-af, forgive, right? Seek to forgiveness. Wa'mur bil-urf, and join good. Wa'arid al-jahilin, turn away from these people who are jahil. He said, wahadha min al-jahilin. He said, my uncle, he's a jahil. Right? Just leave him alone. And then when he said this verse, Umar radiallahu anhu, he just stopped. And the beautiful thing that always strikes me about is how the nephew now, how he describes Umar radiallahu anh. He said, وَكَانَ وَقَافًا عِنْدَ كِتَابِ اللَّهِ. Right? He was a person who would just stop when it came to the book of Allah. Like the Quran owned him. Right? The Quran owned him. You know, people joke a lot about other people being haters, and there are a lot of haters in this life, and you know, and they don't. Some people don't like other people get ahead, and you know, because and there's a problem because they think that all the good should just be for me. I guess it's sort of this entitlement thing, and it's also this miserliness because they're being miserly in the division of Allah. Right? What difference does it make to you if that person Allah gives to that person? It's not affecting you. But some people are so stingy, they don't like to spend. They even don't like it when their spouse spends, or their children spend, or their friend spends. They're miserly about other people's money. And that translates even all the way to Allah. They're miserly in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives. Who are you to tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala how to divide His risk and who He gives what to? But this is a little bit different. This idea of both is actually a feeling of contempt. It's a feeling of animosity, hatred, dislike. You find other people unbearable, something burning, malice. This is a good word, malice for the other individual. And there's different reasons why this comes up in some people. Sometimes it comes up because there's a clash of personalities. Sometimes it comes up because there's a clash of views. You see some people who are liberals. You saw this with how polarizing, this is the word they use in politics, this Trump era was, where you have the people on the right and the people on the left, and they absolutely hate each other's guts. It becomes like a deen, right? They hate each other. And so sometimes it's a clash of views, right? Some people are liberal, some people are conservative, this or that. Sometimes it's because of jealousy, right? Some people are so much envy, they start hating the other person because they have something that they want, right? There was actually a song when I was growing up, it was called Jealousy, right? She's got everything that you want. That was literally refrain in the pop music. But a lot of this comes back to this idea, and it's actually I was just thinking about this, and I said the reason a lot of times that people hate is because people are different. And I just, it's such a beautiful thing when a thought comes to you, and then I was reading somewhere else, and I wrote in one of the commentaries, Imam Nawawi writes about the same thing. This is one of the reasons that people hate, is these differences between people. Black people hate white people hate black people hate brown people, it's just, why? Just because of skin, color of your skin? But sometimes it's that simple. People from this school, like Aya kids hate UAF kids. UAF, why? You're Islamic schools that live down the street. Does it make any sense? But it's different, right? People form an affiliation towards something, and anything outside that affiliation, then they start developing hatred. And it also arises sometimes when a person wants to take revenge on someone, but they can't. They want to harm someone, but they can't, and it creates frustration. They eventually this festers and becomes, what's that called? It becomes negative. Now, hate is actually important. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put it in our lives for a reason. Because you are supposed to hate sometimes. You're supposed to hate evil. You're supposed to hate injustice. You're supposed to hate oppression. And this hatred is such a strong emotion that it motivates you, it drives you to do something about it, right? Like I have a very soft spot for abuse, right? Of child abuse, sexual molestation. Like in my back of my mind, that's something I want to do something in my life about and contribute to protecting individuals from that because it scars people so badly, right? And so I hate it. And so that it motivates me in the back of my mind, I want to do something about it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put it there for a reason. But the thing that's not okay in this spiritual disease is this baseless hatred that sometimes people have. When the base of that hatred is not for something that's good, but it's basically based on a person's nafs, right? And sometimes people feel justified in the hatred. They say, oh, well that person said that to me, she did that to me, so that's why I hate her, right? She shouldn't have acted in that way, right? I just hate her guts, right? People, and so sometimes it's something this small, but then they make it this big in their life, right? They make it an atomic bomb. There's an inherent friction that exists based on human relations. And there's so much in the deen, and we don't have time to go into it, but silman qata', join those people who cut you. That is all about taking people who do bad to you and doing good to them. Taking people who do bad to you and overlooking them. Forgive. If you overlook others and you have mercy on others and you cover up the faults of others, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do this very same things for you on the day of Qiyamah. So you have to overcome. You cannot let those negative experiences with other individuals devolve into hatred, because if it was like that, then the whole world will fall apart. No two people can live together. The Prophet ﷺ would talk about that it's better to be amongst the people and put up with the other. He recognizes that people can be a pain in the neck, right? People can say things which are really insolent or really inflammatory, really insinuating. We get that, but put up with their other. It will build character. It will build forbearance and helm within yourself. And there's goodness in that, and that is part of makarim al-akhlaq. And so the deen is constantly asking us to overcome this coefficient of friction, right, and be with people, and not allow it to become hatred. And I'll give you one hadith in the Prophet, and it's a long hadith, but basically the Prophet says, "Do you want to see a person in Jannah?" And the Sahaba said yes, and he said, "It's that person." So the Sahaba actually went and stayed with him. He didn't do any special prayer. He wasn't reading a lot of Quran. He wasn't doing a lot of ibadah. He's like, "What are you doing that's so special?" He said, "I don't do anything special. I only think of one thing." He said, "Every night before I go to sleep, I clean my heart for every other Muslim." First of all, think about this is a Sahabi. He wasn't hanging out with Qurayshis. He wasn't hanging out with kuffars. He's hanging out with Muslims. He's hanging out with Sahabas, right? Sahaba, the most beautiful people. So Sahaba, staying with the Sahaba, what do you have to clean your heart from, right? I mean, it's not like they were sitting here swearing at you. Things happen, right? Things happen between husbands and wives. Things happen between parents and children. Things happen between your friends and your neighbors. Life happens. It's okay, right? It doesn't mean that people are bad. It's inherent friction that exists within the system. But the amazing thing that he did is he kept his heart pure. How many people can actually say that I don't have anything in my heart for anyone? Khalas, no one. The Prophet said something, he kept his heart so pure, so much so he said when someone said something about another person in his presence, he says, "Don't say something like that because I don't want it to taint my vision and have a negative screen when I meet other individuals." Because even if you keep out the bad thing that someone said about someone, somewhere in the back of your mind now that exists. It's a bias. He didn't even want his heart to have a bias towards individual. He wanted to take people as they came to him. So, and then and this is also a secret, that if you've been hurt by someone and you hate them because of that hurt, understand that person is going on scot-free in their life. They don't care about your hurt. And you're sitting here for years and years, mired in your hurt. That person's enjoying their life. You're suffering. You're actually doing their job for them. Stop. Right? Stop giving them ammunition. Stop fulfilling their mission. Let go. It will set you free. Right? When you let go of the hatred, the first person to benefit is you. But I'll tell you that sometimes, and sometimes it's not possible to do that. Sometimes it hurt, and I recognize that. And sometimes people get worried, like, there might be a sister who was raped, right? And then you're saying, "Oh yeah, you have to completely forgive your perpetrator." Although there is benefit in that spiritually for the person to do that, to even forgive them. And very beautiful stories about Muslims who have taken the killers of their own children and forgiven them. It's gone viral on internet and stuff. It's very moving that the akhlaq that our deen gives us. But like, say you can't bring yourself to do that. Does that mean you're a bad Muslim and now you're sinful because now you have malice? Right? That's the problem, that people who are trying to walk this path of spiritual purification, they said, there's some people I can't get past. I just don't like them. There's a different word in the Arabic language which is called intibal, which is called like a tightness. This is not impermissible. If you feel tightness around another individual, and it could be for any of the reasons, it could be because they did something bad to you, right? And that now your heart just doesn't open up to them. Or it could be just about something else. Sometimes some people, they just don't get along, right? They just don't think. Now you don't have to feel bad that, oh, I hate this person. But maybe you just might not like them very much. But that's an involuntary feeling that came in your heart. You're not doing it. It just came naturally. That's not something that you held account for. When we talk about malice, and the thing when the Prophet says that two people who have this hip and this malice, that they will not be forgiven. The hadith is in Sahih Muslim. They're not forgiven. It actually becomes a blockade for your own forgiveness. When we talk about cleaning your heart, we're talking about people who sit there and they have these machinations, and they're thinking, and they're plotting, and they hate that person, and they're thinking about it at night, and they think about it during the day. It is a volitional, active process of hate. Now, how do you deal with this? The way that you deal with this is understanding that hate is the absence of love. Hate is the absence of love. The way that you treat hate is by fostering love, learning to love, and learning to love people genuinely, and loving people indiscriminately, even the sinner. Even in our deen, we don't hate this. People say, oh, subhanAllah, how could you say that about, a homosexual person or something like that? You don't hate the homosexual. You might hate homosexuality as an act. We hate the sin, but we don't hate the sinner. We have love for every individual. And this is something that sometimes people, as they become more righteous, that you shouldn't take them, be very your close friends, and you shouldn't have mawadda with them. That doesn't mean that you can't have love for them. And what having love for them in this is actually لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه أو كما قال رسول الله, right? And none of you will believe until you love for your brother what you love for yourself. In the commentary of Akhihi, Imam Nawawi goes to show, I'm not going to go into the whole commentary, but this Akhihi doesn't mean only Muslims. It talks about a universal brotherhood of humankind, right? That you should have a general feeling. This love we're talking about is not necessarily make them your best friend. We're talking about you want khair for them. You want good for them. And for the non-Muslim, what is the khair you want for them? The khair you want for them is that they have the deen of Allah, that they have the deen of Islam, that they have hidayah. And it's that feeling, not that I'm right, I want to prove you wrong. If you go to da'wah with that attitude, it's not going to bring barakah. If you go to da'wah with the idea that I love you, I don't want you to go to Jahannam, I want you to succeed in this life, I want you to succeed in the hereafter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put asar in your words. He will put love in your words. And love is the thing that touches people's hearts. There's this, I've given the story many times, but it's such a powerful story about that one woman in Pakistan. She was like, scandalous and wearing terrible clothes, and all the mullahs are giving this fatwa and that fatwa and this thing about her, and she's like, goes off on the mullah's back, and she's, you guys are hypocrites, and it's just a terrible situation. And the same sister, mashallah, she changes her life, and she wears dupatta, and she comes to the deen, and she settles down, and she comes married. And so they asked her in an interview, they said, how did you change? And she said, I met this one individual, he came, and just showed me love, right? Just showed her love. It was a religious figure who just gave her love. Beti, I care about you. Just that small word, my daughter, right? I care about you. What are you doing? You shouldn't be doing this. Or he might not even said that. He just showed her care, concern, attention. And they asked her, who is that person? She said, it was Mala Tarjibin. Right? A little bit of love goes a long way. And that's something that's really lacking in the world. So this is the way that we're having trouble even loving our spouses, loving our children. Kids say, can you imagine kids sit around with each other and they say, yeah, I hate my mom. I hate my dad. Why? He didn't let me go to the party. Is that a reason to hate the person who gave you life? Right? There would be no party if you weren't alive. Right? Wake up call. Small things, and they use this word so flippantly. I hate them, right? I hate my kids, right? I hate my wife, right? I hate my spouse. It's so over. Just stop hate, right? We have to love. And the way that, so that's how you, so a person might ask, how do I develop this love for other people? Even love for other people who don't do good to me. Loving people, not for their own sake, but loving them for the sake of Allah. This is a big thing in our deen, right? One of the people who will be combined under the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of Qiyamah. 7 people, special people, are people who met for the sake of Allah, who loved each other for the sake of Allah. It means you don't necessarily see eye to eye, you both don't like to play basketball, you don't have a lot in common, but you both love Allah, and you both love the deen, and you also want to improve in your deen, and you help each other become better in your deen, and you meet for that reason. You're under the shade of the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on that day when there is no other shade. So, redirecting our love for our spouses, for our children, for our friends, for our community, for the sake of Allah, that khairun nas anfa'un nas, the best of people are the people who are beneficial to others. That al-khalqu ayalullah, these are the dependents of Allah. Right? You stop seeing people as, like jerks, and say that, subhanAllah, these are the quote-unquote children of God, right? These are the dependents of Allah. I want to go and do good to them because of their connection with Allah, and I love Allah. Then it becomes so easy. It becomes so easy to love people. Making dua for other people. If you have bad feelings for another person, do the opposite. If you're feeling envy for another person, they got a better score than you. They have more talking bayans than you. They have a better house than you. They have a better spouse than you. They have better kids than you. Their kids got into a better college than your kids. Make dua for them. Ya Allah, their kids got into college. They got into Harvard. Make them get into Harvard Medical School, right? Make something more than what they have. And as you will do that, that's bending the paper the other way. It removes that negativity. Another treatment for this is to forgive individuals. And getting in the habit of just forgiving and forgetting, not collecting red stamps. Right? That is just done, happened, it's not a big deal. Right? Don't make a big deal out of everything. So some people say that, oh, I've been living with this person, we had so many fights, and there's it just builds up, and they keep all these red stamps until it becomes like a mountain, and then they drown in the red stamps. Just forget it happened, it's the past. Right? Live in the present, and this is one of the beautiful du'as that one of our teachers used to make. When he used to make du'a to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, gai guzrawa mamlas, basically deal with us like, okay, that happened in the past, you just let it go. Right? We can do that to others as well. Right? We can do that for others as well. And the last thing is develop some hilm, develop some vastness in your chest. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Halim, He's forbearing, meaning that when people say and do silly things and wrong things, just look at them like they're just kids, right? Just like they're kids. Don't make a big deal out of it. They said it, it's just some words, they probably don't mean it. And just overlook it, forbear it, and we just keep on going. And the fact of the matter is, they're not only kids, we're all kids. And the fact of the matter is that in the end of the day, we're all kids. So this is one of the things that we should try to do. And then the last thing is just on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be nightly. It could be from Jummah to Jummah. You can be from Nisf Sha'ban to Nisf Sha'ban. But from time to time, you gotta do a spot check. Look inside and see if you have bad feelings for anyone. Right? And if you do, then try to undo that. Send a gift to them. Talk yourself out of it and get rid of it because it doesn't benefit you. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله.